It's good to see everybody. Again, the conference so far has been great. Hats off to you, Tom, and your staff for putting this whole thing together. It's just been enlightening, illuminating. The speakers are great, just the camaraderie here, the connections that we've been able to make. Seeing folks Soul Circle in person has been probably the biggest highlight. Finding out that Stasi is literally really a spiritual giant has been a really big thing. So get us started here. My name is Keith Murphy. I go by he, him, his. Those are my pronouns. There's a lot of ground that I'm going to cover, and I will tell you this right now. I will not get through all of my slides. Yesterday, Dr. Fanning said everything about me, like going through slides, having a difficult time. I and someone else talked about being diagnosed ADHD, and I wanted to reach out to you later in life. I didn't know that it was a thing. And I'll go into it a little bit later, why it plays into my story, why it's absolutely important, and part of the reason why I do what I do. There's a few other folks I'd like to thank, too. First, obviously, my parents for getting me to this place in life. Try not to get emotional, because without them, I wouldn't be here. The sacrifices they made, all the things that they had to do in order for me to be able to stand here as a 52-year-old black man who thought at one point in life I would never be here. For me, that's a really big thing. Also grateful to my sister and so many other people. I think about the students that I work with, because again, without them, I would not be here. I think of Lisa Laitman, who is a pioneer in collegiate recovery, who literally helped create an industry by meeting with a few students that were looking for support at Rutgers University for collegiate recovery, and then the program just grew. We're literally going into our 5th decade of collegiate recovery, which is astounding. And I don't say any of that lightly, because that's a really, really big deal. And if you've been involved in any part of a college environment, to have something to be sustained for that period of time is really something else. And if you know how the sausage is made, I should turn off my mic, and I'll do a side meeting for everyone that's in higher ed. But if you know how the sausage is made and all the politics and all the personalities you have to navigate in order to get support for students, you know that doing anything on this scale for anybody for more than 2 years at a time is a big deal, because agendas change, missions change. So I really have to shout out Lisa for her work. I also have to thank 2 other clinicians that I work with, and actually one of them has been there since the inception of the Rutgers ADAP program, Barbara Kasher, Brian Kay. Those 2 folks are instrumental. They've been working to support students in recovery for a combined now maybe like 60 plus years. That's how much experience they've got in doing this work. So thank you to them. Few more people, and this is really, really important that I get through all of these. I really also want to thank, and I'll go back to Tom for a minute, because during the Panini or the Panorama 2020, because it was a thing, and I don't think Tom knows this, but having Soul Circle was literally life-saving. And having students in collegiate recovery was life-saving. I was one of the few people that had the privilege of being able to go back to campus. Our students, when everyone else had to go home, our students, because they didn't have a place to go, for a lot of reasons, because home wasn't safe or they felt like they had community, they stayed on campus. So what that allowed me to do was actually go back to campus. And I went back to campus like 4 out of 5 days or more each week. And that actually helped me to stay grounded. Now, we stayed 6 feet apart with open windows and fans blowing, but we all got together, we sat outside, and that was transformative, because it was in that moment, and you all remember, we talked about, and George Floyd was murdered. We all had to have really deep and hard conversations about who we were and what we were about as a collegiate recovery program. And it was for the first time, I think, that we had maybe 4 or 5, like 2 or 3 students of color, a few gender diverse clients, students, and the rest of the students were white. But that was honestly the first time that we actually had to sit down and confront some stuff. And let me tell you, it was the most productive time that we had, because not only did I get an opportunity to speak into their lives, they gave me the opportunity and they spoke into my life, which to me, and if you know you work with students, the best thing is to have a student actually call you in on your stuff and to actually hear them and know their intentions and what they want to do. Because for me, it's a privilege. to have someone, especially a young person, to be like, hey, Keith, I got to censor myself. You're messing up. You can be better, and you need to do better. And trust me, there were times where I didn't want to hear it, but it was nice to hear. And I take those things to heart. The last person I want to acknowledge is Chantel. Chantel, without a few people, but Chantel, and I say this without fail, and if you got a chance to meet Chantel and know her, she literally helped put collegiate recovery on her back and helped transform it. Without pay, just because, one, Chantel recognized that she didn't have a space. And the sad thing about what I'm talking about here, and what many of us, people of color, people who've been marginalized, most of the work in terms of making change has come at our expense and on our backs. And Chantel did that. And she's someone that I'm super grateful for, and at least there's probably at least not once a week that I don't think about her. And I could tell you just how I think about her now, because it's tax season. She would always put something on Facebook about waiting for her refund check. But it's those little things that would come up, and I'd be like, yeah, that was a Chantel moment. So, but even in her toughness was a softness and was a deep love, not just for black folks, but for trans folks, but also for the larger collegiate recovery community. So I want to definitely acknowledge Chantel. So I've got a lot of ground to cover. Now, you heard that was just the intro, right? And you're like, wow, that's a thing, right? So I got a lot of slides. I will guarantee that I will not get through half of the slides, because most of the slides technically are irrelevant. You can look at the slides, you can study the stuff, take your time. If you got time, you're in the bathroom, you're like, hey, what am I doing? Just go through, look at the slides. You need some quick sleep. You're like, hey, what can I do? Look through the slides. I'm not going to go through all of them, because honestly, I hate a slide deck. It's one of the terrible things I found out about higher ed. Everything has to come with a slide deck. Like, where's the bathroom? Well, you get a slide deck. It's always ridiculous stuff. And maybe, Tom, next year you should have a slide deck for the parking, and then that may help alleviate all the things. But I hate slide decks. But I'm going to use it. Don't want to, but I will. So we're going to go through a few things. Now, look, honestly, I've got ADHD. So you're going to notice I'm going to bounce around all over the place. So I need someone definitely with the time thing to be like, not even be gentle with it, but just be like, stop. Just literally stop what you're doing. Stop talking. Somebody shut off my mic. Okay. And if you let me go, I will turn this into a comedy routine. What you don't know about me was that my gift of ADHD was that I was class clown in high school. That was a coping thing in retrospect. But that's why I'm hilarious today. So let me go back. This setup is a white supremacist setup. The fact that we're here with the slide deck, we're in higher ed, I'm here, you're all there. This is not really the best way for us to connect and for us to learn and to see each other. You're looking at the back of someone else's head. You're not making the vital connections. So me, ideally, I would cut half this room off and cut off another room, and we'd all circle up and talk about our experiences. Because honestly, that's where growth comes. You can get some stuff from here, but that's not really it. What really happens here is the human person-to-person connection. Most of the stuff that we're dealing with are interpersonal or tied to relationships, right? Part of DEI work, and I even shudder to say DEI work is about us learning how to talk to each other rather than past each other. That's one part of DEI. The other part of DEI work, right, is also, now, Stasi, stop. We have this ongoing debate on decolonization versus liberation. For me, part of this work is towards liberation. The only way that can happen is for us to circle up and have conversation. This is good, but not too much of this you're going to remember. You're going to really remember what I said, how I presented it, and how you felt. So it's not about the intellectual stuff, but it's honestly about how you felt, how you experienced me, and how you experience others. That'll be the thing that'll make the difference. That'll be the thing that'll confront a lot of your biases and a lot of your BS as you walk around. So I didn't even start clicking on the thing yet. So I told you how the slides aren't necessary. But again, part of the reason why this is up here is like if we were a group, we would help set the stage, set the groundwork here, because we're going to dig into some stuff. I was really going to go hard with the group, but I said, no, don't do that, Keith. Don't do it. All right, so Stasi said it, so I'm going to do it. And in light of what other people said, so these are some things that we use. And notice creating a braver space, not a safe space, group agreements, norms. I'm going to go back to a conversation or a quick text that Tom gave me the other day. You probably don't. Do you remember? Yeah, you were kind of busy. Tom said, we have a Soul Circle retreat after this. And he said, hey, Keith, I want you to be ready because you're going to run into a lot of plantations on the way down. In New Jersey, there are no visible plantations. And I said, okay. I'm like, yeah, I get that. And I'm like, he's like, well, be ready. I'm like, but Tom, technically there are no such thing as safe spaces. So no matter where we go, there's going to be problems. And one of the things that I'm learning in working with ARHE, Association of Recovery in Higher Education, as the Northeast rep, and what's going on throughout the country, I think it's going on here in Virginia, is the DEI work is being wiped out. And a lot of people are really bothered by that. But I'm like, honestly, it's mostly white people. Because good liberal white folks are just like, oh, the DEI is going away. How are we going to talk about this? You need to talk to a black person. Because we've been dancing through raindrops for a very long time. And we've been making it work. And the sense of comfort and safety that you have, or the discomfort that you're experiencing now, is actually telling you about your privilege. Because you had it, you were in a soft space, you thought by an election things would change. But I could tell you, year after year after year, every person that has been in office, and I will even say Barack Hussein Obama, was problematic in many, many ways. So anybody that occupies that office of the presidency is a problematic individual because of all of the powers that push that person into that place. So to talk about DEI as a problematic issue now, or it's going away, you need to talk to some marginalized folks. Because I don't know if you know, but marginalized folks have not had the best relationship with these here United States of America. And we figured some things out. So I said I wasn't going to go in, but I just went in. That's the first part. The other thing, and I, again, appreciate so many of the panels and the things that, especially the black male professional panel, which was great. And actually, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Fanning, all of the stuff that was put out there, I think oftentimes, again, with stuff like this, is that when we're doing this work, we always think about, the poor fill in the blank. But I will say this, BIPOC folks, members of the alphabet army, were not broken. We don't need to be fixed. There is nothing wrong with us. We are not coming from a place of deficit or lack. Understand the problems that exist in white supremacy. That's the issue, that's the problem. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here, many of you already know, but that's the thing I wanted to go in with. It's like you look oftentimes to the marginalized folks to help you out and understand things, but understand this, we are not the issue. Oftentimes, if you go back through history, the people who fight the most for the dominant majority's rights are the subordinate group. Tell me I'm wrong. So that's the light work. That was the easy part. So here's getting to know me. All right. These are all these wonderful people in my life. Okay. Up there, that's my dad. So you see where I get a lot of foolishness from. And that's my mom. That's my mom, me, my sister was younger. This Muppet is me. And that's my mom. That's me, my wife, my mom, my dad, and my sister. My mom hails from Cumberland, Virginia. My dad is from Neptune, New Jersey. They met on a bus in 1963. She was a part of one of the migrations from Virginia to the north for jobs. And if you're black, you understand what that migration was about. So these are the people that help make me who I am, and I'm very grateful for them. So I identify as a cisgender, heterosexual black male. I'm college educated, 52 years old. I'm in long-term abstinence-based recovery. I also identify as a Christian, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, a lot of different folks. But usually when people think of Christian, they think of that the white male person, but not understanding that being Christian is very dynamic, and how God speaks to me and with me and through me. ADHD, I was diagnosed ADHD with impulsivity, hence the chaos of this presentation, diagnosed at 51 years old. That was a late stage thing, and I'm going to go into it in a minute. Also married with no children. Have a great rescue dog, Gidget. You'll see her at the end. Love her to death. Like, she's the only person in the house, see, dog, person, that doesn't get into any trouble. She literally pooped on the carpet, and we're just like, can I help you clean that up? And be like, wow. But yeah, if I did that at home, different story. Different story. So I'm going to go back to ADHD with impulsivity, diagnosed at 51 years old. Why is that important? Because one, being in long-term abstinence-based recovery, black male, and predominantly white school system, being with parents who didn't have a lot of good relationships with white people, but moved to a white place to help this young black boy get a really good life, a good education through osmosis by just being in proximity to white people. What had happened was that I didn't realize that I had ADHD. I was an underachiever. I was a daydreamer. I was terrified. I was scared almost all the time. Didn't realize it. But what I was focused in on, I was focused in on. I loved history. Once I found that thing, I would hyper-focus in on it, right? I couldn't shake it. It was just a thing. Everything else in school didn't matter. It faded. It disappeared. But now, 8th grade, when I found, because I was kind of lonely, too, with ADHD, because I would spend a lot of time in my head, not knowing how to connect with people. And Dr. Fanning laid it out perfectly. Now, I don't necessarily identify as neurodivergent. I think that's a whole other thing, and understanding what it means to be neurodivergent on a spectrum, because I've learned ways to cope and ways to function. But I didn't realize that losing my scarf, getting locked out of my house, I was a latchkey kid, too. So being locked out of my house, losing my keys, not forgetting my lunch, things that are so vital to me, I couldn't remember. I swear, Centennial Lane Elementary School in Ellicott City, Maryland, must have a pile of hats and scarves that are mine still. Because I would just lose things. I would be the worst. And I would be the kid that would walk around talking to every kid in class during nap time, break time. That was a thing for me, right? It was hard for me to get through. Later, that loneliness, when I found cannabis, smoked cannabis, things got a little bit better mentally. It was like, oh, okay, I felt da-da-da-da. Managed to get through life, get through college, do some things. But it wasn't until after college I found heroin, cocaine. Someone was just like, oh, you should try heroin. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, right? That's a good idea. I'm like, sure, why not? You like it, I might like it too. So I did it. And they're like, oh, it's going to feel like you're floating on, like you're going to sink through the floor, all this magical stuff. That didn't happen to me. Actually, what happened to me with heroin is that I felt regular. I felt regular schmegular. I could concentrate. I could do things around the house. I could sit down. I could watch TV. I could walk. I could slow down. I was like, what is this? I'm like, people are like, oh, man, this is so great. I'm like, I'm not getting the same dope. And then it really clicked for me later on in life that part of my heroin use was partly me medicating this. I didn't realize it. I had no clue. That was the thing that strangely helped me to feel okay. Now, obviously, being in abstinence-based recovery now, doing some things, I've tried medications, other things, but right now, honestly, the thing that works for me, exercise and caffeine. I've tried stimulants, I've tried other things, and I'm like, you know what? I figured out how to get through life. Now, there's some things that I really have to work on, and trust me, we'll get to know, this will all make sense. There's some things that I have to do, like when I'm at work, everyone else can keep their door open. Keith Murphy cannot do that. Keith Murphy has to close his door and stay in his office. And if, I swear, Post-its, if it was a prize to get either money or Post-its, I would take Post-its. I will tell you why. Because my desk is covered in Post-its. It's just lists. That's how I function. That's how I do things because I've got so many things that bounce in my mind. Most people think sequentially. For me, having ADHD means that list that's like this is like this. It all comes at once. And everything is everything, right? And sadly for my brain and how it works is that everything is connected, spider webs. This all is connected, trust me. You're like, see, you all went on a trip. I knew it was gonna, didn't know it was gonna happen, but this is it. But thank you for listening to part of that. And it goes into why I'm into collegiate recovery, why I believe in it, because it's part of my story. Okay, here, dad joke. Okay. Now, if you've been in a training with me, you've heard this joke before. Now, the thing about me and dad jokes is that I make them up. This is my own personal dad joke. I take a lot of pride, and if you do not laugh, your parking's gonna be messed up for a while. So why did the shark stop going to the sandbar? Right? That's a good dad joke. That's a good dad joke. It's got to have the groan, right? And then just like the It's like we love hate you so much, but you're not going to forget that terrible joke. The other thing I like to do too is because this topic is usually so hot, so heavy, so sensitive, I like to mix in a little bit of the medicine. I mix it in with the medicine with the applesauce. So that's why I make it a joke to start. And I'll keep it easy. And this is the last thing here, if I don't mess it up. Poll question. I'm out. Have a good morning. All right. All right. So this slide is for everyone that gave no as an answer to the poll. Don't get stuck in old ideas. Keep recognizing that reality. But it's a really powerful quote. So I'm going to go into some things, and I'm going to slide back over here for a little bit. So hopefully you all can see the slides and where I'm headed with this. So part of this topic is really about this. Actually, this was a hard presentation to put together. It was really difficult because this came from the heart. This was really, really tough to do because it was about personal connection, soul circle, and just how I felt. And I really had to break down essentially what I do and why I do what I do. And to be fully transparent, the collegiate recovery program in which I manage and direct and give guidance and vision to, there are only 2 black people in it. One person identifies as gay, white, cisgender male, and the rest, the other 15, cisgender, heterosexual white folks. That's the reality. And the thing is that there's no, and I don't use the word recruit, but there's no way to engage, or there is, but it's limited, and finding people that really need the support and the services. Going back a little bit, I could have used collegiate recovery supports when I was in college. I was on my way to full-blown active addiction. There were problems, there were issues, there were things, there were concerns. And the Rutgers Recovery House did exist. 15, I was arrested, put on probation, breaking and entering, stealing weed. There was not a day, this is when weed was weed, let me stop, but where I wasn't high in the morning going to Spanish class. Again, ADHD, functioning, just being into school, all those things. But I could have used the collegiate recovery program. And had I walked into that collegiate recovery program, I would have been the only black person in that program, had I gone in 1991 or 92. So the loneliness that I already felt would have already been amplified. The microaggressions would have been twice as bad. There was no clinicians that looked like me that were doing AOD work at the Rutgers Counseling Center. And in fact, the Rutgers Counseling Center was just getting on its feet to do AOD work. And then other black students on campus weren't thinking about recovery or substance use. So here I was between two worlds. One of the things that I really appreciated, Mayor and Tom's presentation, there's a space in between about, like how to support those students. And there's some things I'm going to touch on here. But it's also the idea of, like, you talked about a sense of belonging. What does that look like? How do you create that? How do people find that without finding people that look like me? So it would have just compounded my sense of loneliness. So this is why this is really personal to me. This is why the subject is tough, and this is why I do what I do, because I know what it's like to be lost and be out there and not be seen. And the other part of it is that I probably understand white culture a lot better than some other white people, because I traffic in it, and I see it from an insider-outsider view. So, next slide. So, why support? Why do BIPOC students in recovery need to be supported? I mean, we'll go into that. I'm looking at two different things. Identify opportunities to change status quo, remove barriers for collegiate recovery programs. And then the last thing is really going to be a call to do something. This is a quote, Kevin Kruger of NASPA, way back when. Just let's remind ourselves that issues of equity and inclusion around race, ethnicity, ability, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity are the responsibility of all the staff and faculty. Now, I love this part. Creating inclusive, justice-centered campus environments can't be left just to multicultural centers, right? How do you say segregation without saying segregation? How do you say intellectual apartheid without saying intellectual apartheid? How do you say separate but equal, but it ain't equal? How do you say it's not really, it's everyone's job and responsibility and everybody's work? But oftentimes those things are cordoned off or put in different categories or different sections because it's somebody else's job. But I like the challenge and the call to action here and the recognition that this is everybody's work. So I want you to talk to the person that's sitting in your seat. I want you to have a real quiet conversation. Just let them know, say, hey, it's my job too. This is my work. And actually, this is more a call to white folks. And if you're like, wait, if I said white and you think I'm talking to you, there's some other stuff that you need to do and understand, like, how did you get to be white? And if you're mad about it, why are you mad about it? The other part of it is just like, can you ask yourself, what more work do I need to do in order to make this space feel like a safe space where people, students, people, human beings feel like they can belong and be seen and be accepted and part of? I'm taking silence as an okay. As long as I got one. Okay, so love this book. If you get a chance, please read it. Patrick Radin Keefe. Now, the reason I bring this up, and I'm going to go back to saying that this is a white person problem, and how many people, Purdue Pharma, know the Sacklers, know all the things? This book chronicles the life of the Sacklers and how that they all came to be. I can't recommend this book enough. I cannot. There's one key part of this book, and this is the main thing I'm going to lean into supporting BIPOC students and really speaking to the white folks here. Do you know that the Sacklers, what they did was that they literally targeted poor white folks? You know, that was part of their business model. That's literally what they did. And the reason why folks in red states right, were more impacted directly by substance use issues related to the opioid overdose crisis was because those states, those red states that are pro-business, were less regulated. There were less protections for doctors to just dole out pills than there were in blue states. So the reason why black folks didn't catch the wave of the overdose crisis until later was because in certain states, doctors weren't, in blue states like New York, New Jersey, they weren't allowed to write the scripts the same way folks were able to write scripts in West Virginia and Ohio. They knew that. So white people, this is your work too, because capitalism, you too. But oftentimes people are like shocked because part of what made the Sacklers so rich was whiteness at its core. Because white people believed that it can't happen to us. Our education, our status, and our privilege and our access was always going to be the thing that protected us. The Sacklers were like, no. We don't care. We're going to flood your towns, your communities. And they did it. But that was the reason why they got rich was mainly because people thought their whiteness was a thing that could stop them from active addiction. For some reason, they thought whiteness was going to be the thing to stop trouble. So part of the reason why I'm saying this is like, folks, this is everybody's work. It is everybody's work to interrogate and identify how white supremacy shows up, follow the money, and understand how policy works. And I thank Dr. Johnson on her presentation on social determinants of health. It's a fabulous presentation. Basically what she was saying is just follow the money. There's another element that's baked in. It was great. It came up to commercial determinants of health. Understanding why finding housing is so difficult. Because the real estate market is wild. But people need housing first. I believe Dr. McCauley touched on that piece, right? But if you can't house people, if people can't afford to buy houses or rent homes and put people that need housing into them. The other part of it is, when we talk about redlining, the best way for communities to thrive is mixed neighborhoods. But if you find current real estate markets, people aren't building mid-income level housing. They're creating and building housing for people who are literally upper middle class. I can say that for my neighborhood, but there's very little housing that's coming on the market, and that's problematic because what that's doing is increasing the wage gap and increasing further disparities in terms of wealth, education, and health outcomes. How much time do I have? Okay. All right, I'm going to keep it moving. Okay. Don't like this slide anymore. Don't like it. I don't like it because it's passive. Where are you in this slide? Most of us are voyeurs in this picture, right? Because of how it's set up. We are standing behind it. We don't put ourselves in the positions of these individuals here. We rarely do that. Because how it's drawn is like we're here. Don't like this slide. At first I was like, oh, that's a great infographic, it's amazing, but it's really, really passive. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't really change the needle. This is the slide I enjoy. I mean, not like in a weird way, but I enjoy it because one, someone presented this to me, and it puts us all in the shot. Because this is how we all participate and sometimes are complicit to old, outdated systems and institutions that mean well, but that don't do well, that need constant evaluation and assessment, but it's not really being done. We always end up doing things the way we used to do them because that's just how the way things are done. Sound familiar? But the thing is, and I love this, it was a quote in a great harm reduction book, and I have it. I'll I can remember the title. I think it's Saving Our Own Lives. And it's a guy, Andrew Tarski, talks about harm reduction is not really innovative, but it's really pragmatic and practical. People are like, oh, we got to do something innovative, but harm reduction really isn't innovative. I don't know, going out to the community, naloxone, basic stuff, it's really not innovative. It's just practical. Practical. But for this person to shovel that would be having to move hell and earth in order to make that change. But what would happen is that everybody would benefit. So part of this reason why I like this slide is that it challenged us to think beyond what's comfortable. And that's what I'm asking folks to do today. Beyond what's easy. And it all wraps up all the stuff that we've been talking about. How do we challenge systems? How do we look at ourselves? How do we look at our processes, right? Because I guarantee this person, well-intentioned, has a great technique on how to shovel the stairs. Can tell you how to do it a million ways to Sunday, and it'll be like, well, wait. And look at this. It's always the most marginalized. Those directly impacted by services or the lack thereof to speak up, and oftentimes are always the last to be heard and advocated for. And look at the separation here. But if you do this first, it'll make everything better for everybody else. Sometimes a bottom-up approach is better than a top-down approach. Still with me? All right, good. So now I'm coming back. Now, why all these messages? Because this is about me. I asked the question yesterday about internalized stuff and how to process it. This is all in me. It's all the stuff that I need to confront. Students called me in about. All the stuff that I walk in with as a clinician, as a therapist, as a human being, walking around on planet Earth. This is a big chunk of the garbage that I have. And one of the things, I wish I had a laser thing, the hostile sexist and benevolent sexist, that's something that I had to look at as a black man. And understanding that, one, women don't need a savior. People are fully capable. They don't need me to be the knight in shining armor. And the thing you say a good woman should be put on a pedestal, that's what I learned. Black women should be elevated. Women should be elevated. But the pedestal's a prison, too. It's a gilded cage. But that was the narrative that I had. And it actually, what it did was that it devalued rather than connecting with people on their humanity. But this is stuff that I had to interrogate and look at with me, some of my own ideas as I support students. Because not every BIPOC student, not every black student's experience is the same. We're coming in with different ideas, different issues, and different concerns. These are the isms that I have to challenge internally. This is some of the mess that I walk around with on a day-to-day basis. That's why I asked the question, how do you deal with some of the stuff that comes up for you as you do this work, as you engage? Because it's all there and it shows up, it manifests. I had to think about how I looked at Asian people, how I looked at differently able folks, different bodies, how I evaluate, assess, criticize, judge. A lot of that is socialization. How those things, those projections, those things that I put out on other people stop me from connecting with people on a human-to-human thing. And lots of times, well-intentioned black folks will only stop at race and never look at their relationship as it relates to, one, sexual identity, understanding gender-diverse folks, and it stops there. But if you're really about this work, you'll understand and see how you can connect the dots. And I can go in and talk about recovery as it relates to women's reproductive rights, bodily autonomy. But oftentimes, if you hear folks in many different administrations talk about collegiate recovery, what happens is that they leave those things out. They don't make those connections. And those things are super vital. And those folks, any folks here doing like health outreach promotion, connecting people, like on campus, on a college campus, or out in the community, you can show your hand. I'm not gonna call you, I may give you money. But yeah, it's your job to help people connect the dots through education and understand This is connected to this, is connected to this. You can't have a parent go into treatment without talking to and providing daycare maybe for their child, or providing transportation or a scholarship. Or if you work in treatment, hey, how do you deal with folks that are clients that microaggress? Do you have clinicians that know how to work with members of the LGBTQIA population? Hey, who's an expert here on how to help Black folks get better as it relates to substance-related issues and concerns? Do you have anybody on staff? No. Guaranteed, if I had insurance, you'd take my money, though. And then you'd blame me for failing out of your failed institution. So remember going back to that first graphic? Then blame the individual for the failures rather than looking at, assessing, and understanding the institution's role. But if an organization is not into understanding all the isms that make it what it is, it's going to replicate and do the same harm. Part of the reason why I support BIPOC students, because we live in a really violent world that blames the individual. I love Audre Lorde. You know, as I get older, heroes change. You know, when I was a kid, I'd be like, oh man, if I could meet Superman, somebody like that was a big thing. But as I got older, I'd be like, wow, if I could go back in time and meet Audre Lorde and spend like an hour with her in her kitchen. If I could sit down and just hang out with James Baldwin, what would that have been like? What would I have learned? So I'm going to go through these slides real quick. Now, I should have warned you at the beginning, too, that there's a problematic video that I'm going to show. But this is a quote from a wonderful friend of mine, Marielle Hufnagel. We've done a lot of work together. She's a white-identified woman. This is her statement. This is her, unprompted, unbidden, coming from her. Statistics show us that white cisgender individuals have greater access to reliable, quality treatment and recovery support services than Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC folks, members of the LGBTQIA+ community, those living in poverty, and other marginalized folks. These glaring disparities cannot be ignored. You saw that yesterday, right? That's a reality. So the quality of treatment is definitely impacted. The quality of care. So recovery supports usually are a reflection of available treatments that are out there. So this video has some really, really hot language in it. Some N-bombs, some F-bombs dropped. The reason I put this video in, and people who've been in trainings with me, and this is where I'm really going to push folks, is this. This issue of supporting BIPOC students in college recovery, I can't say it enough, is not a BIPOC problem. It is a white person problem. Now, I'm going to show the video. Now, some of you may be activated. We can talk afterwards. But I guarantee it's not stuff that you haven't heard before or haven't heard already. But this was during, I think, the tail end of the Panini, the Panoramic. This is a Lyft driver who gives a ride to these two folks from a Pennsylvania bar. But you're going to have to listen closely to what he says, because a lot of what they all say, because the message is quoted, is the message is not quoted, but like that's not the right word. The message is there, but you just got to really listen to it. It's really underneath the surface. So I'm going to hit play.
Hello, for Jackie, right?
Yeah.
How are you?
You're like a white guy.
What's that?
Are you like a white guy?
Excuse me?
You're like a normal guy. Like you speak English. Sorry.
No, you can get out of the bar. I'm gonna cancel a ride. That's inappropriate.
What?
It's completely inappropriate. If somebody was not white sitting in the seat, what would be the difference?
Are you serious?
She said, wow, you're a white guy.
Oh.
That's okay. I'm not gonna take the ride. You guys can get out.
Really?
Yeah, completely inappropriate.
Oh, you're a fucking asshole.
It's all on
You're
camera,
a piece
man.
of shit.
It's all on
I
camera.
should punch you in the fucking face.
You're gonna threaten me?
Yeah.
Assault.
Yeah, fuck you.
Wow.
Because you guys are racist fucks.
You're a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Fucking nigger lover. Fuck you. Get the fuck out of here.
No, I'm calling the cops on you, man.
Go ahead.
It's all on camera. It's all on camera. Do you guys own the place? Is it your place? That's great. Everyone's gonna know. Fossil's last stand for Black people, right? Yeah, fuck off. You.
All right, well, that was hot for the library, right? So, oops. Okay, I'm going to skip through that. But the reason why I played that slide, one, I'll go back to white folks, is that doing this work should cost you something. That man took a fare. He was going to take a ding on his Lyft thing. They could have reported him, right? But what did he do? He took a stand. He knew the cost, and he was willing to pay the cost. Oftentimes, what gets us stuck is that we end up being, not we, many folks end up being afraid because we oftentimes confuse comfort and courage. He was willing to be a courageous individual. Now, for many folks of color, we just live that out. By living, we do the work, believe it or not. By existing, we do the work. Taking a nap is us doing the work. The freedom to just to sit down is us doing the work. So I struggled with commending that individual because that was the first time he stepped outside of his comfort zone. Maybe, I don't know. But he had done something that said racism was not acceptable in his car. So the challenge is for us here and our folks here is just to identify systems, structures, language, how we do our notes, how we communicate with people, how we do things, and understand where we are in our own process. He was willing to do that, and he made his business. He said, in my business, this will not stand. Are you at a place where you're willing to lose money, friends, time, talent, and treasure to make sure people get a fair shot and the world becomes an equitable place? I'm going to blow through so many slides. I told you they don't matter. You can read these slides. It's good stuff, wonderful stuff, amazing, in fact, mind-blowing. Like, you'd be like, wow, you put some time in. You'd be like, I did. You did. Like, wow, look at all about stigma, too. Now, you can go to NIH, look at the website, and find out about stigma. The one thing I'm going to give you about all of the stigma, and I'll go back. Stigma is essentially, it's about othering. That's pretty much what stigma is. And it can be institutional, individual, internalized. There's one key component that's often not said about stigma. It is oftentimes the absence of policies for marginalized folks. That is also a sign of stigma. Most people can spot like, oh, that's stigmatizing language, that's problematic, but where have you actively worked to include BIPOC individuals? That is also painful, stigmatizing work. If you don't think about other folks in your space and how that may impact them, you're actually maybe contributing to stigma in your organization. If everyone at the table has the same thoughts, looks like you, same economic demographic, same degrees, same experience, you are probably committing some really egregious wrong to somebody. You have not done your due diligence. You are actively participating in stigma. You are engaging in white saviorism. That is stigma-inducing. That is the absence of including folks that need to be included in the conversation. All oppression is connected. There's a great poem by Stacey Ann Chin about this whole thing being connected. I love the fact that we talk about economics, oil, tied into privilege, that's tied into inclusion, tied to slavery. It's all connected stuff. So we can't pull one thread without dealing with all of them. I'm going to keep it moving. Again, great slides. Everyone's seen this quote from John Ehrlichman, White House counsel to Richard Nixon. The only problem with this quote here is that John Ehrlichman, it was after he was dead, and it's not verifiable if he actually said it. So he said it to a reporter maybe way back when, but it's still attributed to him. John Ehrlichman was pretty much Nixon's right-hand man in dealing with domestic policies and affairs. This is what he said about the war on drugs. We all kind of know this, but understand the war on drugs started long before the Nixon administration, long before even the Chinese Exclusion Act. There's been a war on drugs in these here United States since its inception. And I don't have time to go into it, but this is just the current iteration of that war on drugs. Going through. Why were CRPs started? One, CRPs were established, honestly, to fight ableism and classism within the university, but what happened was that they left out race, they left out gender, they left out sexual orientation. So what we're doing now is playing catch up. So remember when I said about stigma, also the idea of not including folks? There were folks that weren't included in the creation of CRPs. Although well-intentioned, good intention, but they didn't see us in that space when they created it. I'm going to move through because I got a minute. 2014. Thanks, Tom. I got a few minutes. Tom gave me a few minutes. So 2014, pretty much the data is pretty much the same in terms of like the demographics associated with collegiate recovery. It's an N of 486, but predominantly still white in 2014, 91.3%. And thanks for the slides, Tom and Mayor. It's pretty much the same. Not much has changed. Still the demographics. And understanding that, you know, we could say like, oh, we increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. Still problematic because these issues still exist in CRPs. All the isms are still there. And even if it was a CRP, right, with all black people, these things would still exist on some capacities. So being engaged in the work. I'm moving along. Okay, who cares about diversity? I'll get into that maybe one day with you all. No, you think because diversity ain't enough, it's window dressing, it's whitewashing. It's really not about that. It's equity. It's about belonging. It's about creating a culture that people feel like whole human beings, not add-ons, not extras, not window dressing, right? It's enough we have a lot of, not just you put the stickers up in your office or the flags, but can I go there and can we sit down and can we chop it up? Can I go there and talk about the things that are really about the things? Can we really talk about the things and know that you understand to the best of your ability about the things? Or can you be honest in your experience? Clinicians deal with an empathic breakdown and be like, I don't understand that. Would you be mind or willing to like kind of pull me in? Like, yeah, sure, let's break it up. I want to pull you into my world. Are you willing to do that? Old stats. So I'm going to go here, George Floyd, really quick. So talk about George Floyd a lot, but how many of you know that George Floyd went to community college? Show of hands. Could you imagine, and this is George Floyd had substance use issues in community college. And then sadly, a lot of the narrative around George Floyd was like, oh, it was an overdose, who cares? Here's a person using drugs, had a drug issue, drug concern. I've yet to run into a student who was maybe past a $20 counterfeit bill, maybe, possibly, allegedly, who's been drunk on campus, who didn't make it home. Whose pain matters? That's why I do the BIPOC, supporting BIPOC students. Whose pain matters? And it's about love. Could you imagine if George Floyd walked into this campus, CRC, would he be received? Would he be loved? And I could probably say, yeah. Tom in charge? Yeah. Other folks? Yeah. He would be seen, heard, and appreciated because I'm looking at the community here. Because of the work that's been done. George Floyd and I are very similar in age. The degree of difference between what happened to him and what happened to me. That could easily have been George Floyd here today speaking and Keith Murphy up there. The degree of difference. I don't know why, but I wonder if George Floyd were able to get the supports that I got, could he be here today? But would that change racism? No. Told you, ADHD, it was going to be bad on time. I've yet to finish a presentation. I've yet to go through an entire slide deck, and if you know me, that's facts. But I don't care. Because it doesn't matter. If I knew giving you and presenting this whole slide deck would completely change, revolutionize what's being done once you step outside of here, I would lock the doors and hold you hostage and make sure that you got every single slide twice. Now, do I believe in education as a vehicle for change? I do, to some extent. But I believe more in exposure and experience. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations in order for change to happen. Change will not come by you sitting there in your seat. It just does not happen. These are facts. So what we're noticing now, more overdose trends are happening in Black and brown communities, not to mention indigenous folks whose overdose rates are exponentially higher than other Black and brown individuals here in the United States, and white folks. So that's a thing. I'm going to keep it moving. Even though it's 2018 again, on this slide, data has not changed, even with the most updated national survey on drug use. Still pretty much the same. And I highlighted the bottom on purpose. The bottom, addiction treatment programs that offer specialized groups for gay, bisexual men show better client outcomes compared to non-specialized programs. But only 7.4% of treatment programs offer specialized services for members of the Alphabet Army. 7.4%. That's shitty. And we don't, here's the other part. We don't even know how good these programs are. That's the other terror. So what's the qualifications? Is it a checkbox? We're gender affirming. Checkbox. Well, there was that one gay clinician that we had. I do CEUs. That counts. We don't even know the quality. It's scary. But as terrible as these programs may be, they still offer better outcomes than what's being offered. But guaranteed a treatment place will take your dollars and then blame you if you fail out. I am. So why does this matter? Again, you'll slide through the slides. Tom got me to come to the NAR conferences a few years ago, got to hear David Best. Man is brilliant. 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 One thing that he said to me is that, well, he didn't say it to me, but I felt like he was just talking to me, right? When it was like a crowd like this, I'm just like, what's up, David? He's like, I see you, Keith. And the spotlight came on him, and he could just see me. It was just like, wow, it was a moment. But what happened was this. And as a Black person, there's a story involved. And you say, well, what happened? But it really is not that big of a story. What he said, which was significant, he goes, people find the treatment that's going to suit the recovery that they're looking for. Totally flipped my wig. And you talk about a guy hopped up going to his job at the counseling center and be like, you clinicians, let me tell you something. You all out here diagnosing people, looking at people's deficits, that ain't it. That's not it. What job are we doing to help students match up with us, right? What are we doing to change our service in order to meet the actual needs of people, to help them articulate what those needs are? So Dr. Aziz was going to challenge him like, hey, paperwork, challenge the paper, like what's in your paperwork? What does it look like? How do you take your notes? What do your notes look like? What kind of language do you use? How do you talk about people struggling with issues? Do you write as patient was not compliant, did not adhere? Do you use that kind of language, stuff like that? Or is it like really like, do you look at how you provide the service? Is there a fidelity to a model? Or is it really looking at what's being done? So that's that little bit of a challenge. But just the same, David Best put that out there. He just said, stop looking at people from in terms of a deficit, but understand they're going to seek out, they internally know what they want and what they need. And they're going to look for that, hopefully as a way to match. I also love the social model of disability. It's fabulous because what it also does is that it puts the emphasis on the institution, not on the individual. It looks at the idea of folks having or living with or through a disability, right, as an impairment, but also understanding the reason why that impairment or disability exists in some capacity is it relates to context, because we create systems and structures that don't allow people to function well. And then we label them as outliers and problematic because then we feel like we have to accommodate people rather than the indictment being on the actual institution as being an issue. And I'll explain a little bit more. It's the idea of us saying, like, here, part of mental health and mental illness basically says the reason you're not well or of use is because you are not a productive creator of wealth or a good consumer. You are now problematic. Social context is what also is a key part of mental health. But if I'm not contributing, I'm seen as a person who's problematic or I have issues. But understand it's our job to kind of flip that on its ear and understand how institutions work. I'm going to go through these really, really fast. Liberatory design, a lot of people have been saying that. Create designs that interrupt inequity, increase opportunity for those most impacted by oppression. That's supporting students in this space. Supporting students now more directly in collegiate recovery, being sensitive to injustice is only the beginning. Justice work of counselors and psychologists involves being change agents. So it's actually flipping that model on its end and actually what peer specialists do who are really undervalued, underpaid for the work that they do, for their expertise. I will say this to my dying day. But the idea of going out into the community as opposed to the expectation that someone should come in to be met for services and sit in an office for just an hour, what is the actual efficacy? And does that actually work for helping people resolve substance-related things? Is it a community health issue? Is it a change that we can do within the community so that someone does not need to come in to see us? What are we doing in order to really evaluate and interrogate the work that we're doing? Part of that work is being done by peers. Again, deeply underappreciated, and the pay is grossly inequitable. So this is stuff that you can look at. This is really basic stuff. But providing, to create a welcoming environment, the key thing is belonging. The key thing is understanding that, like, whosoever is going to walk through your door, that doesn't mean that you have to be the be-all and end-all to that individual, but understanding, making connections to other folks, so that person feels like they can be a part of your CRP in some size, shape, form, or capacity. They may not get everything they need, but they know at least when they come here, they get a moment of respite. That's what's essential, and that's what's key. And I'm going to just burn through these and just get to the end. Because I told you, ADHD, I found a design thing on PowerPoint. I could not leave it alone. I just had to play with it to no end. So I'm going to get to the back. This is stuff that you all can have, you can look at, understand. I think someone else talked about yesterday, again, partnerships with other agencies, other groups, being multidisciplinary and being open to evaluation from other groups. Maybe not even other treatment places, but even places that may be adjacent to what it is you do. Getting fresh eyes and a fresh look. Because they may be able to offer perspective like, hey, I'm a clinician, but maybe, or a psychiatrist, but maybe someone that's adjacent to this work can really look at what we're doing, maybe other therapists, and be like, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you saying this? How is this working? How is this showing up? One of the things I really have to laud our counseling center and what we do is, one, we have connections with people not only within the university, but obviously within the community. The other part of it that's absolutely key is that we have a multidisciplinary team. We all talk to each other. The other thing that's really absolutely key is that we're not afraid to, one, talk about substance use, because that may be a thing in some counseling centers, but we're also not afraid to talk about recovery. And the biggest challenge that I'm going to put to our group going forward is really to be able to have, one, more peers involved in our work, because this year we were able just to hire our first just a collegiate recovery specialist who is a peer, period, full stop, not a clinician. And for folks and clinicians to wrap their brain around that whole thing, literally it was a thing. They're like, well, he should probably get mental health first aid training. I'm like, no, first of all, mental health first aid training is not efficacious if you look at all the research and the data. It's not good at all. It's just window dressing. It's to help people feel better. The other part of it is that's not his role. He is not there to be a clinician. He is there to support students in their recovery. The idea of life going beyond the clinical arena is hard for a lot of clinicians to understand. That is also a key part of understanding and developing supports on campus for BIPOC students, BIPOC folks. So I'm holding up everything. Stasi. Again, the considerations are here. For you, the slides you'll have. And it's just little stuff. If you get a chance, this is a wonderful, wonderful book, and I just adapted it and tweaked it. It's from Crystal Fleming's How to Be Less Stupid About Race, on racism, white supremacy, and the racial divide. Take the time to go through this on your own and understand your process of socialization. How did you get to where you are today? How did you begin to understand who you are in terms of your social identity and how those identities show up and how they manifest? Which ones become more salient in certain situations or circumstances, and which ones tend to fall back or recede? But do this. Sit down with a friend. Have somebody to process with. Don't ask a person of color to sit down with you and do this. Find another fellow white person, somebody to sit down with to do this work so that you can then begin to do the other work. But this is basic, basic, basic stuff. Part of this work is always to identify and interrogate with the idea to evaluate and assess and then make change. But it starts here. The last thing I'll say, and I'll drop the mic and be quiet, DEI work gets a bad rap. Supporting students is part of that DEI work. That's one thing. But the one thing that I don't like about doing a lot of things like this, too much of it is put on the individual. And it's put on folks like you and me who, in the great chain of being, are kind of somewhere lower middle. And sometimes we're not the folks that need to be in a space like this because we're out here doing that thing. And the other folks, it's the other folks that need to be in here. And we all have that person in mind. Actually, we know probably 3 or 4 people who need to be in the room to have this conversation. And some of those folks make a little bit more than us. And some of those folks cause us a lot of problems and a lot of pain. And they may be well-intentioned or not. But some of this really isn't for us. So DEI work puts a lot of work on you all, and that's not fair. But I honestly want you to do this. Just literally, take a minute, just look around. Just look around. I guarantee they're not going to bite you. The hesitation was, I'm comfortable and I'm safe. All I asked you to do was just turn around and look at another human being. Right? That's all I asked you to do. But part of this work is to understand the work happens collectively. And Zico said it yesterday, I'm tired of conversations, right? Because conversation's never ending. But it's still a conversation. And some of you, this is your first time having this conversation. For others of you, you've had this other conversation. But like that Lyft driver, some of you need to have a different kind of conversation with some people. And grab someone else and be like, hey, are we doing this or what? And it's not out of malice or out of hurt, but like bell hooks, it's done out of love. So ultimately, that's why I do what I do. Because I know what it's like not to feel connected, not to feel loved, not to feel cared for, not to be seen. Because I know what Soul Circle students needed. I know what I needed. Empathic breakdown, I'm willing to also learn about not what I need, but what they need. Because I'm not the expert on their life or their experience. I have some knowledge, some understanding, but it's for them to fill in the gaps for me. But thanks, that's me.